management systems. I'm sure our future speakers will talk about that. I have the pleasure of introducing Professor Joy Chaudhary, who is the Director of Operations, Center for Professional Studies, Adamas University. He's an eminent leadership development professional. He's a motivator. He's an emotional intelligence coach. He's been in the field for more than 17 years, and he's a double postgraduate in linguistics and management, along with a master's in psychology. He has been a guest lecturer with multiple universities across Europe and US, and he is a very reputed professional dealing with online learning, especially these days. Now over to you, Professor Chaudhary.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate Dr. Pandey. Thank you so much, Ujjwal sir, for such an amazing opening out to this webinar. Thank you, Dr. Sandesha, for being there. And thank you everyone who have joined in today to understand that there is a change that's going to happen, and that's happening. And now if you look at the way teaching had been before COVID, and the way teaching is going to happen now, there's a lot of difference. The difference is not only in the way it is delivered, but it's also the way it is perceived. Let me try and make you understand a little bit about what we are talking about. Yes.
I'll just interrupt you for a second.
Sure.
Dr. Sandesha Raipa has a Google form for all our participants. It will be uploaded on Zoom right now. We'll request all participants to please respond to that Google form here on Zoom. It will also be uploaded on Facebook Live. So your responses are extremely important. Thank you so much, sir, and sorry for interrupting you.
No worries. Thank you. Now, let me start off with the whole world has seen the change. The whole world has been going through this change of moving from a normal classroom scenario to digital learning. In India, the reason had been spoken out by Ujjwal sir earlier. Because of digital division and because of economic conditions, there had been multiple issues where it was not possible. It was not happening as such. And the teachers also were not very comfortable getting into an online classes, rather than they were comfortable what they had been doing for so long, right? But this three and a half months has brought in that change. I always say this, any kind of disruption always leads to innovation. And I think that's what has happened. Everyone, all the teachers have gone ahead and started taking this initiative and getting into this training program, training online, teaching online, which is fantastic. But my question always stays, that is sending documents through WhatsApp, it's not online training. Online training is much more. Online training covers multiple gamuts of training, all right? So first of all, you are not in front of them. How would you force them to listen to that, or to read it, or to learn it, and make sure they understand those? I think there are multiple aspects of psychological part of it, which is educational psychology and normal teaching and training perspectives. So before I go ahead, I would like all of you to be patient. I'll get on with a presentation so that things become a little clear. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Yes. Is my screen visible to everyone?
Yes, sir.
Lovely, lovely. Now, before I go ahead and start talking about the art of teaching online, the first thing I would talk about is, before we go anything, before we try and understand what online training is and what is it all about, how do we get into it, we need to ask the following questions. The first question is, what would they learn? The second one is, why would they learn? And the third is, how would they learn? Now, let me quickly, take a little understanding, or take a little time in discussing on a different thing. There was this gentleman called Knowles' 5 assumptions of adult learners. So this is what is very important. When I'm talking about, let me start off talking about, see, we got to understand this, a small kid in junior school, or else in standard 3rd, 2nd, 4th. Teaching them is very different, right? So online training or education, we would not talk about it. What we are talking about is probably in the college area, all right? Now, this is the 5 assumptions of adult learners. Now, the first one is called self-concept. Here, the person is trying to mature. Psychologically, this person is maturing, and he thinks that I am more independent now. I am more self-directed human being. I have transformed from a dependent personality towards one of being a self-directed human being. That's one which we have to keep in our mind. Now, the second one is adult learner experience. As the person matures, he accumulates a growing reservoir of experience that becomes an increasing source of learning. That means when I get into your class, probably my brain is filled with certain things of that subject, or certain points about that subject, all right? Now, we always talk about unlearn and then learn and stuff like that. But then again, their experience matters. So when you start teaching to them, you have to start off from there, from what their experiences are. The next one is called readiness to learn. As a person matures, his readiness to learn becomes oriented increasingly to the developmental tasks of his or her social roles. Let's try and understand this when I talk about what is readiness to learn. I'm going to say, when I am teaching someone, if the person is not interested, or he or she feels that I am, how would that help me? All right. We always talk about WIFM, all right. What is in it for me? All right. So how would that help me? It's very important. The role I play at this point, I am a developing person. I am grown up now. All right. How would that help me if I want to do engineering? I want to sit for my gate, and I want to join a PSU. How would that, whatever subject you're teaching, how would that help me? I think that's very important for all of us to understand as educators. The fourth point is called orientation to learning with maturity perspective changes. From postponed application of knowledge to immediacy of application, and according to his or her orientation towards learning shifts. I think this is important for us to understand. That are we able to give them certain learning which they can apply immediately? I think this is essential for all of us to understand. Fifth, and the last but not the least, it's called motivation to learn. Now, this motivation, the moment a person grows up and slowly he grows up, the motivation becomes more internal in nature. It's no more I would come to the class, all right, and I would listen to the lecture. No, I would like to go to the class and listen to the lecture because I want to know about it. It becomes more internalized. The motivation is more intrinsic motivation. Now, quickly, I'll talk about 4 principles of Andragogy, which is the adult learning. One is called problem-centered, where adult learning is more problem-centered than content-centered. That means whatever I give them is not important. What I give them, does that help them in solving their problems, is more important. Second is called relevance and impact. Adults are most interested in learning subjects that have relevance and impact to their job or personal life. For example, as I told you, I am an engineering graduate. I've just joined my first year engineering. I want to, after finishing off my engineering, I want to sit for my gate and I want to join a PSU. Now, how would that help me is very important, all right? The relevance of the subject, the relevance of the knowledge, and the impact of it is what that's going to matter. Next comes the adult learner experience. Experience, including mistakes, provides the basis of their learning activities. I'll talk about this a little later when we would do online teaching or creation of online content. This is very important. We need to check with them how is their experience. When we do an activity, when we give them an activity and they do an activity, we would like to know whether they liked it or they didn't like it. If they didn't like it, what is it they didn't like it? Can we change that? Can we give them a different activity? We need to work on those. Now comes in the involved adult learners. The most important thing is you got to involve them in their learning process. You got to tell them that how are you planning to teach whatever you are teaching. And then obviously they need to know how the evaluation happens. You got to involve them in the entire learning process, keep them excited, make them interested in their entire process of learning. Now I would go to, we also as educators, when we create content, one thing is important, we need to understand how people learn. As I asked that question, how would they learn it? I think it's important to understand Bloom's taxonomy here. The first thing when we talk about knowledge is great. Knowledge is fantastic, no questions about it. But when I talk about knowledge, what am I talking about? I'm talking about remembering previously learned material. And how would there are a lot of questions about assessment. And let me tell you that once we start creating assessment, all right, whether we are talking about a formative assessment or a summative assessment, we need to understand that every part of Bloom's taxonomy can be assessed differently. For example, when I'm trying to assess knowledge, I have multiple other things to get it done. For example, how they arrange certain knowledge, how they define something, how are they able to duplicate? Once they memorize, can they recall, or can they recognize something they have seen earlier? I think these are all attributes of knowledge. The second part we talk about is called comprehension. When I talk about comprehension, I'm also talking about grasping the meaning of the material and can be assessed through classification, description, identifying something, report something, or restate something. The third is called application. Once we have got knowledge, we understood that knowledge, am I able to apply it in my day-to-day life? That's where my importance of knowledge comes in. So using learned material in new and a concrete situation. So what we are talking about is application. We are talking about choosing something from two different options: illustration, solve, and write. The fourth, we're talking about analysis. Analysis is what we're talking about. We are talking about breaking down the material into multiple component parts and understand the structure, how it is formed. So we have analyze, we have categorize, we have criticize, distinguish, and test. Next comes in synthesis. When I talk about synthesis, I'm talking about whatever has been learned and then broken down during analysis. Can I assemble all of them together? All of them together. It reminds me, whenever I talk about creation of content or teaching or education, it reminds me of a jigsaw puzzle. And I have seen a small kid sitting with a jigsaw puzzle, and she is with so much of intent trying to fix up the jigsaw puzzle. Now, after an hour and a half time of hard work, she fixes it up. All right, she solves it. And now what's next? You got to break it down again and form it again tomorrow, right? I always talk about when you're creating content, it is very similar to the way you do jigsaw puzzle. So when I talk about synthesis, I'm talking about assembling parts together to form a new whole. It can be assembling, it can be collecting, manage, organize, and propose something new. Now comes in evaluation. And now when I talk about evaluation, evaluation can happen for every part when what we discussed, okay? Judging the value of the material for a given purpose, right? So when I talk about knowledge, I can evaluate the kind of knowledge I've gathered, all right? So I keep giving this example to all my teachers and trainers that what's your job? When they tell me that my job is to teach or train people, I tell them, no. If teaching or training was a job, I could have had anyone doing it. Your job is to add value to those group of people who are sitting in front of you, or listening to you, or talking to you, or comes to you to understand a subject. Your job is to add value to those people. Before you have taken a class, the way they had been, or they had been thinking about something, after the class of yours, they have to think differently. There has to be value addition towards their holistic growth. I think that's what is important. So after Bloom's taxonomy, let me quickly move into what we would talk about, the original process. When I talk about content creation, the first thing when I talk about instructional design is to create a method, or we talk about instructional strategies. All right, so there had been multiple. We started off with something which is called waterfall model, and then we moved into Dick and Carey model. But one of the model I would discuss today is the most common, most popular model called ADDIE model. Now, when I talk about ADDIE model, what am I talking about? I'm talking about analysis, I'm talking about design, we are talking about develop, we are talking about implementation, and last but not the least, we are talking about evaluate. Now, I would not get into implementation and evaluation today because we do not have it. It's a huge subject. Now, when I talk about this, I keep talking about it's not a one-day training also. I'm saying it takes a lot of time, and today it's only an hour, probably 3-hour program. I would talk to you all about half an hour, 45 minutes. I don't think we would be able to cover up entire. I'll give you just an overall idea. Now, analysis is when we are trying to talk about what are we planning to do. When I talk about my subject, let me talk about any subject. You pick up a subject like physics, chemistry, you talk about electrical engineering, a subject, or you talk about humanities, you talk about literature, you talk about culture, you talk about anthropology, sociology, psychology, any of that. Whatever subject you are working on, the first thing you got to do is analyze before you get into delivery or creating a content for a certain specific group of people. The first phase, the first part of the analysis phase is called training need analysis. Why do you need to give them that training? What's the requirement? What do they get out of it? The second one is target audience analysis. What kind of people, what kind of demographic condition they're coming from, what kind of experience they've had ever earlier, all of them together. Third, but not the least, it's called the task and the topic analysis. Now, what's the task and the topic analysis? Every time you start working on a topic, you need to understand in that topic, what is it you're looking at? For example, one small little sentence which you want them to understand, memorize, keep it in the head, drill it inside the head. That's what is important. And how do you create a task so that you understand that's been drilled inside the head? All of these things together form the analysis phase. Let me quickly get into design phase. Designing the instructional strategies, activities, and assessments that will achieve the learning objectives. Now, I saw quite a number of questions when I talked about, when we started this webinar. A couple of questions had been based on assessment. How do we do assessments? And I would also talk about content is not important. Important is not what I am saying. Important is how I am saying what I'm saying. I think that's very important, right? Because why would people sit and listen to you? They are not even inside the classroom. I'm saying when they are inside the class, they are supposed to stay in. That's the terms and conditions you have put forward. But when they're sitting at home, they do not have that terms and conditions, right? It's no more there. It's their prerogative. Whether they want to sit, they would sit. If they don't want to sit, they would not sit. So whatever you are trying to say, you got to make them interesting for them. You got to make it so interesting they cannot get up from their seat. They would stop, go to the washroom, come back and start again. That's how you want to create. That's what designing phase is all about. Let me quickly get into design phase. Comprises of 5 parts. First thing we do is called learning objectives. We would try and work on what objectives we would work on for each and every lesson plan. Then we'll get into sequencing, how we would sequence the entire content. Third comes in the instructional strategy, which is how I'm gonna give it to people. Fourth comes in the delivery strategy, that how it's gonna put up in the LMS. We were talking about, there was some people talking about LMS. LMS is the learning management system. Whatever you create is put up there, and the person when sitting at home can access that, get into that LMS, go into that subject, and can study. All right, that's the delivery strategy. Then we have the evaluation strategy, that how much did they learn and what is it, aspects of it. Now let me quickly get into a normal tutorial sequence. First is introduction, then we get into quickly basics of the learning. Third, we get into advanced part of it, that means the detail of what we have already said. And fourth comes in the summary. Fifth is the assessment, and we are done. This is called a classic tutorial sequence. It's very normal, very classic sequence. The next one is called the activity-based sequence. Everything stays the same. You introduce the topic, you get into the content. Now, what comes in is your activity. You create an activity, then you make them do that activity, get into summary, and then do a test or an assessment, and then you end. But this is one of my favorite. My favorite is called knowledge-based sequence. What do you mean by knowledge-based sequence? I'm going to say, I would not allow someone, this is when it is linked, I would not allow someone to move to from first module to the second module until and unless they know about their first module. They have passed the assessment, they have cleared the assessment on the first module. I love the sequence because it allows them to learn, and they can also pace their learning or understanding as they go by. All right, so they can take their time, they can go through it. If they do not understand, they can go through it once, twice, 3 times, and then they give the assessment to clear it up. All right, so it is called introduction. They can again test, content, test, again content, test, content, summary, and you end. Now we move into the developing piece. We develop activities. We would develop what we are going to do. Now in the development phase, we have content development as a first part. We develop the content. Whether a lot of people talks about, is it good we have a video of the professor, lecturer giving a live video, or we can change it to something else. My suggestion always is give it always a mix and match, right? So it's always advantage to give them something which is mix and match, a little bit of the lecturer's face and the lecturer talking, and then you bring in something else. You can have graphical representations, you have animation, you can have some other video links, and all of them, and then move on. So content development is the first part. Then comes in something which is called storyboard development. Storyboard is what you would say and what is the visual along with it. Third is the courseware development, developing media and the interactive components, producing the course in different formats for web delivery. So you got to chop and change the way you deliver it, and that's the courseware development. Is your LMS development, how you move it up and send it across to the students. Structure of a normal typical e-lesson. We start with learning objectives, introduction, content, summary. I am not going to get into too much of theory. I would tell you what I'm trying to get into. Now, Ujjwal sir was talking about student engagement, and I would love to tell you all that it is one of the first and the most important aspect of your online training. Now, online training, as I told you, they are not in front of you. They are sitting at home. You cannot even control them. All right, forget about it. So it is important you bring in an engagement with the student, you and the student. That means not you as such. It is the online digital content. Okay, now that content has to be created in such a way that it keeps the student engaged with the curriculum, with the content, with the training. So there are 6 aspects I usually talk about. There are multiple things we can also talk about. The first thing I talk about is keep it short and sweet. There, if you look at the people today, our attention span is reduced to the minimum today. All right. So if you keep more than 15 minutes, 20 minutes of one single video or a lecture, right, people would not listen. They would get bored. Most of the time I have heard when I was doing research, most of the time people said that, oh, you know what, I get sleepy when it is more than 10 minutes, 15 minutes of video. It gets boring after some time. All right. I think that's very important. Keep short and sweet. Another thing, Ujjwal sir was talking about storytelling. You are not there. Bring in that personal touch. You are not there in front of them. You have a separate connection, separate bonding with students. All right? Bring in that. Create a storytelling session in the beginning or after every, probably 15, 20 minutes. Bring in that. All right? Then we have the track the progress. Let people have a tracker which says you have done till here. Why I'm telling you this? Because the learner would like to know how much he has done. I personally, when I sit and do an online learning, online course, I would like to know after a week's time how much I've done, what amount I've completed, and how much am I left with. I think that's very important. So you have a tracker on top of somewhere where it continuously shows that how much time is spent and how much is left. I think that's very important. Then we come to something called checkpoints. Checkpoints are nothing but, every time you have a checkpoint where you ask them that, did they understand whatever happened? For that thing, what I can do is we can add an activity or a small little assessment at that point in time, so that we can check their knowledge, check their understanding, and how the progress is happening. Then we have regular notifications. Connected engagement is very important. How do you create that? Send them notifications. You create automated notifications. That can happen. You can operate from your email address. That can happen. There are multiple ways of creating notifications. And nowadays, automated notifications are very normal, very common. You can always create that after every couple of days, he gets a message, he gets a mail stating how is he liking it, or what's happening, what are the changes that he wants to bring in, and stuff like that. All right. Create a community. I have heard multiple people today, multiple teachers I had been talking to, multiple trainers I've been talking to, they create a personal group in Facebook or in any other social media. Whoever their students are, they make a small little group and they keep interacting on that subject, probably whenever they want to. All right. I think this is important. This is how you create more engagement. And another thing, very important, I'll come to that a little later, how you can keep them glued to the laptop or the phones we are talking about. Recorded presentations. I always say this, it's important when you create a recorded presentation, it's important you follow certain rules and regulations. It's just not the entire thing altogether. All right. The first thing is chunk it, break it down into small little pieces. 5-minute, 7-minute pieces, small little pieces. Second one is illustrations. Lot of pictures, illustrate multiple things. Do not write too much of text. Do not give too much of content in text, because that's going to bore people to death. All right. Do not do that. Bring in curiosity. One of my favorite is this. Pick curiosity. What you do is start off with a kind of a question. All right. Question that it's kind of probably thought-provoking question, right? Ask some question. What do you think? Why this doesn't happen? We have normally seen. I keep giving this example to people that when we have a single S. All right. This is a very simple example. For example, SEE. I say see. So SAW, I say saw. But the moment I say SUGAR, why don't I say sugar? I say sugar. All right. Why do you think it happens that way? All right. Can be a thought-provoking question. I'm saying it's very important to get into that. Start off with a question so that they get glued onto it. Next is design. I think it is obvious if you understand. I try and bring in a lot of design elements in my own small little presentations. If I do a PowerPoint presentation, I try to bring in a lot of design elements, because that is what makes people a little interested in what you're saying. There are a lot of colors, and you have to understand what contrast is. All right, when you have a lighter background, you have a darker colors or darker font sizes. But when you have dark background, you have to have lighter colors and backgrounds and font sizes. So let me go to the next. This is very important. Online education would be dependent on this. I'm saying if you cannot inspire actions from people, things are not going to work. I'm saying if you got to understand this, that when I talk about inspiring actions, and what am I talking about? You would find multiple people. They join a training program, they join a course, they drop out, they do not finish, all right, or they take a lot of time to finish, all right. Now the question is, are we making them bored? Are we making them bored with whatever content we are trying to give, right? So we have to inspire actions from them. They need to take actions, right? Massive actions. So when I talk about inspiring actions, usually I talk about two different methods. One of them is articulate results. This is more motivational perspective. Tell them what they would get if they finish off this. Where would they reach? How would they move to the next part? I think articulation of results is very important. And second is testimonials and key studies. Tell them, talk about what has happened. You talk about multiple people, what they have done, when they became, all right. So if you want to become a scientist and do something in research area, give them examples based on that, and then key studies from there, all right? So that you can inspire them to take action. Now I come to the most important aspect of content development, which we are talking about, graphics and animations. Now graphics are of multiple kinds. We have decorative graphics, we have representational graphics, we have mnemonic graphics, we have organizational graphics, relational graphics, transformational graphics, interpretive graphics. So first one is called decorative graphics. Let me show you what it is. This is a decorative piece. So when you are trying to give them something and you decorate it, give it to them, it looks nice, they feel good when they read it. Not too much of reading material, as we discussed earlier. Now this is also something which is decorative graphics, all right? So you want to give a quotation, you want to give them a sentence which you want them to learn and remember, wrap it around in a nice little packaging, and then give it to them. And I'm sure that they would remember the packaging, all right? Now we have representational graphics. When we talk about representational graphics, we're talking about this. Farm animals, we have multiple farm animals together in one single graphics. Or we talk about this, all right? These are all representational graphics. Now we go to mnemonic graphics. Mnemonic graphics are like this. So we are talking about homes. One is Huron, one is Ontario, Michigan, Erie, Superior. All right, so these are homes. Now we have another one which is Rastakar. So when I talk about this road, whose road is this? So this is a kind of a mnemonic graphics. Quickly let's move to organizational graphics. We are talking about this as an organizational graphic, what we talk about, all right? Fire watch management, the hot work operator, and the permit issuer. These are called organizational graphics. This is called organizational graphics. So after organizational graphics, we'll come to relational graphics. That means these kind of graphics creates a relation between two things or multiple things. All right. So we can use it for everything. You name it, and we can use it. Whether it's say science subjects, whether it's engineering subjects, whether we are talking about liberal arts and language, everything we can use relational graphics. Instead of stating something, instead of giving a sentence, a paragraph, I would like to use more of graphics so that they understand it better. So these are called relational graphics. So let me move from here to the next, which is called transformational graphics. So something, there is a lifespan. So when I talk about lifespan, everything comes with a lifespan. All right. So there is a transformation that happens from the way you are born and from the way you grow up and become a great leader. Saying these are all transformations. Any transformation can be shown through graphics. All right. So let's try and see one single kind of graphic. This is, look at this. All right. The transformation of a butterfly. All right, we can show this through graphics. So we can show multiple things, transformation through graphics. So this is called interpretive graphics, where we are trying to interpret multiple things. This is how to prevent COVID. We have cover coughs, avoid close contact, avoid touching, clean your hands all the time, clean and disinfect, stay at home. So this is called in the interpretive graphics. Now, once graphics are done, I would quickly, before I move to animation, anyone who has any question at this point in time, or do we take questions once we are done?
I think better at the end. There are
Lovely.
many questions in the chat anyway.
I'm sure. I was not able to see the chat, so I would get into the chat once I'm done with this, and then we can discuss.
Yeah, please.
Sure. Great. So we start with whiteboard animation. Now let me show you a quick video of what whiteboard animation is.
Is the link not working?
Give me one moment. It would.
Okay, okay.
Now you understood what whiteboard animation is, all right? So you have a whiteboard and you one hand comes in and draws, all right? So there are multiple, today, predominantly, most of the time, multiple subjects are explained through whiteboard animation.
Could you show the video? We didn't see the video.
Sure, sure, sure.
I think the video is on the other screen. You'll have to share that screen as well.
Give me one moment. Give me one moment.
Umar Shankar gets it right always.
I think, yes. Can you see it now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so next we move to something which is called character animation. Now, when I talk about character animation, we use, let's try and see how character animation is. Can you see this?
Yes.
Can we speed this up because the audio is not audible?
Audio is not audible?
No, sir.
So you may drop this and move to the next.
Yeah, that's what I was planning to do. Let me go into cartoon style.
Full screen. Full screen.
I'll do that. I'll do that. Let me open this. Can you all see this?
Yeah.
So if you don't mind, we can skip the animation part and go to the next part of the presentation.
Sure. So when I talk about animation, there are multiple animations you would find. There are multiple different kinds of animation you would find. We have animated infographics. So when I talk about infographics, what you saw me using in my presentation is called infographics. When you make these infographics move, all right, that's called infographic animation. You also have something which is called kinetic typography. That means, for example, you have written here something which is called history, all right, and suddenly the history starts moving. And this word moves out and comes in as, for example, 1 year, all right, and then comes in the First World War or a Second World War or whatever. You can use that. That's called kinetic typography. Then you have stop motion animation. Then you have live animation. Now, after animation, let me quickly move to the last bit of it. When I talk about in videos, I'm talking about instructor-led video. I'm talking about demonstrations, scenarios, simulations, learner-generated videos, and docudrama. Now, instructor-led video, we all know. When I talk about instructor-led video lectures, I'm talking about you giving a lecture. The shooting happens for not more than 15 minutes because you give them in chunks. Do not give them all together. Break it down into small little pieces, all right, and then give it to them. Add a lot of animation there, a lot of graphics there. And then comes in demonstrations. for multiple different subjects where you need to demonstrate something. You take a video of something, some action happening, some process happening, some procedure happening. So those are for procedural perspective. Then you have scenarios and simulations. Simulation can happen for a lot of activity and assessment scenarios also. All right. For example, when you want to bring in that interactive session, that's when you bring in the scenarios and simulations. Learner-generated videos where someone is learning, someone is in the lab doing something, someone is in the classroom trying to give a lecture, give a presentation, you video that and send it across. That's learner-generated videos. Docudrama, predominantly history, predominantly old, some actions, activities, something that has happened earlier you are trying to represent, you can create a scenario. For example, it's like theatrical presentation, all right? Now, after this, we come to something which is called, remember this, this is the last part when we are talking about combining everything together. We are talking about content for lessons, ensuring the objectives are met, use audio, video, podcast, graphics, animation, simulation, and all of them. Bring in objectives, need to carefully draft the learning objectives so that you have the module outcome to it. Activities and assessments, practice exercises, additional examples whenever required. The more number of activities you do, the more learning is done. You have glossary. This is also has to be put up, all the words and the relevant descriptions. Recommended reading, suggestion for all recommended reading and resource pointers. Now, once I talk about, for example, when I'm talking about this, yes. So once I'm talking about creating the entire content, if you would realize that first thing I did is I analyzed, I thought, I sat down at the piece of paper, pen and paper, I wanted to write it down. I write down everything about what I want to give. It is important to understand what is it I want to give to them. What is it I want them to understand and memorize? They want to keep in their head. I want that is very important. I want that all of you to understand that nothing matters. First, sit down with a piece of pen and paper, write down what are the 3 things, 4 things important as an objective. What you want them to understand. Now, how do you give it to them? When I talk about how do you give it to them, there are a couple of things you need to write down. You're going to create the storyboard, all right? Divide the piece into 2 parts. On one side, on the left side, you can do all the narration piece, and the right side, you do the visuals, the graphics, what you want to give. For example, when I'm teaching a part of psychology, for example, social psychology, any part of social psychology, for example, cognitive biases, I would write down what I would write on my left side, and then right side, I would write a design or an animation or a graphic, whatever I would give there. I think these things are very important when you design it. Now comes in the develop piece. So you have to sit down with the media people who would develop it, try and make them understand that it is essential that every minute of my presentation, people are engaged. People are hooked onto it. They want to know more. If they want to know more, then only your training is successful, your teaching is successful. If they are waiting to go to the next level, I think that's when you develop thing and then move into it. All right. I think this is what I wanted to talk to you all about, the entire process of understanding Knowles principles of adult learning. I wanted you to understand Bloom's taxonomy of how we learn, and then we come into the development piece of it. Because content in itself is not important. What is important is who is taking it and how are you giving it to them. I think I would end here. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Pandey. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.